Today we're going to be covering the new G17 Unstable Bomber pistol. Whether you want to use it for PvE or PvP, it will work for both ways. If you want to blast enemies out of your way, this gun will be it. It has insane AoE damage. The gun's explosion range it has by default is insanely high, so even if you miss your throws, you will probably most likely will still hit the enemy. This gun doesn't really require that much aim to use. It's just basically press R, blast, and do the damage. Now of course, if you don't want to watch the video and you just want to see the mods, they will be here in 10 seconds. But I just want to say that if you want to juice out your weapon to the maximum, if you want to min-max your damage and achieve the highest possible damage with this gun, then I highly recommend you to stay until the very end of the video. Now here's the PvE setup and preset for this weapon. The armor pieces you will use is 2 Shelterer, 3 pieces of Blackstone, and 1 piece of Viper Mask. You will be using Rapid Calibration 2x Elemental. Your drink buff will be Whimsical Drink. Your food buff will be Hot Dog. Your secondary weapon will be Bingo. You will use it to mark targets and swap to your main gun, which is the pistol. Now jumping to the PvP preset, you will need to use Bingo as a secondary weapon to utilize Hunter's perk, so when you mark players, they will do less damage to you. This would be strictly only for 1v1s. It doesn't really do much against hordes of enemies, like against 2 or 3 or 4 people. It's mostly for single target. The mods you will be using is Supercharged on the gun, Deviation Expert on the helmet, Pinpoint Strike on the mask, Elemental Overload on the gloves, Resist Advantage on the top, Covered Advance on the shoes, and Life Force Boost on the bottoms. 2 Unstable Bomber Suffixes will be used for the gun and the mask, 3 Talons will be used for the helmet, gloves, and bottoms, and 2 Battle Mods will be used for the top and shoes. Battle Mods are obtained from Nissa Loot Crate. Unstable Bomber is obtained from events. You just have to do high-risk events and choose the mod you need. Talon Suffixes are obtained by doing Pro Mode Silos. For the armor pieces, you will need to have 1 piece of Treacherous, 1 piece of Viper Mask, of Key Armor, 4 pieces of Savior, parts, and that's about it. For the calibration, it stays the same, Rapid 2x Elemental. You will be upgrading the armor pieces in this order, 1, 2, 3, you get the point. So whatever armor is marked 1, 2, 3 is the order you upgrade it first, because that will give you the most HP in PvP. Now for the hides you want to put on your armor pieces, you want to put Golden Wool on the helmet for damage reduction, Lucky Rabbit Hide on the mask. This doesn't really matter for PvP, as it's just for yield increase for PvE. Wasteland Wolf for the top piece and for the bottom piece. You can do Golden Wool for PvP on the shoes, or you can do Movement Speed Hide or Sprint Speed Hide. Doesn't really matter, whatever you really prefer. Golden Wool still works for PvP, it doesn't change that much. It's all personal preference. Your food buffs will be Sandwich, Whimsical Drink, Iced Tea, or Stardust Ratatouille. For those who really clicked on the video to see the mods and the armor, the video really ends here. It's all about min-maxing now. So now I'm gonna explain quickly how this gun works. So first of all, the description on this gun is entirely wrong about some stuff. So hitting enemies grants a 20% chance to trigger Unstable Bomber. That is correct. And whenever you shoot the enemy like this, you trigger Unstable Bomber, just like so. And it is chance-based. If you played Jaws before or any other guns, they trigger Unstable Bomber every 4 hits. So this gun is utilizing trigger chance. It is quite low. It is almost not worth to shoot with this gun, as sometimes you can get unlucky and almost never trigger Unstable Bomber. Your reloading is replaced by a throwing animation, and whenever you throw the weapon, as you can see, you refill bullets from your reserves. That's pretty cool, and this is what makes the gun good in PvP and PvE, although it does consume a lot of ammo when throwing your weapon. The higher clip size you have, the more ammo it's going to use. Throwing your weapon consuming all ammo to deal blast damage to targets within 3 meter range equal to 50% consumed ammo multiplied by 18% of your psi intensity, capping it for 50%. So this is wrong. If you click J on the weapon, right, you will get a menu popping up like this, and here V is going to show you how the weapon actually works. And here, if we read more about this, it says range equal to 50% plus consumed ammo multiplied by 15% of psi intensity, and it caps to 400%. Here it says the effect benefits from Unstable Bomber's damage and range bonus. This does matter for later, so basically this description is correct. Now this part doesn't really matter, it just shows you how much ammo you use when throwing the weapon. Do note, this gun will use so much ammo when you throw your weapon, so you'll be crafting pistol bullets left and right. Lastly, Unstable Bomber damage in range is plus 10% for 10 seconds, and each time Unstable Bomber deals damage, you will keep getting stacks, up to 50%. So every time you inflict unstable bomber damage. Above my health bar, you can see that a icon appears, and that just basically gives me a 10% range bonus increase, and it gives me a 10% unstable bomber damage. Now, there are two multipliers in this game, unstable bomber damage and unstable bomber damage bonus. Unstable bomber damage is not showing up in your inventory, and it's not meant to show up actually. On my first throw, when I throw the weapon, my damage will be 212. Now, if I wait it out, the stacks have disappeared, and I will do the same damage every single time on my first throw. This damage scales the more bullets you have. As you can see, I have 138 psi intensity. So since I'm on 13 bullets right now, my damage will always be 212. Now, since we have a stack, on the next throw, we should do 233. On the third stack, we should do 254. We'll do 275 now. Then we'll do 297 or 296. And now we'll do 318 or 317. Now you can actually calculate your damage by using a formula. This formula, I will link this Google Sheet in the description. Basically what you can do here is you put your psi intensity over here, whatever it is. Maximum you can have is 1070. And once you put that in, let's say you want to know your damage of 23 bullets when you throw the weapon. So you just copy this value and put it as your base damage. That will be your base damage over here. Since my psi intensity is 138, so then I just need to copy the value of 13 bullets because I have only 13 bullets. As you can see in my mag, I have only 13 bullets. Of course, if you shoot one bullet, then you would need to copy the base damage of this value over here. The formula is so complicated, I think the devs are on crack when they were making this weapon, but basically, this sheet will be 99.9% correct when you try to calculate your damage. Your damage will be capped on 23 bullets, and that is because we're reaching 100%. If you try to throw the weapon on 23 bullets, and then if you try to throw it on 24 bullets, you will notice no difference. You can see that every value here is almost 4.5% damage increase, but on the 22nd bullet here, the damage is only increasing by 1%, and it's capping out at 23 bullets. So there's no purpose of getting high magazine on this gun, as you only put a calibration on and you're good to go. You don't need more ammo. Now if you go to blueprints, pistol, right click on the gun, scroll down here, click X on I keyword, you can see that unstable bomber, it triggers 1 blast damage of your 100% psi intensity. Elemental damage, status damage, unstable bomber damage, unstable bomber range, and unstable bomber damage bonus will increase your blast damage. So you will need to build this gun off elemental. As you can see, we have 138 psi intensity. All I would need to do is put my 138 as the base damage value. And then since I have no damage bonuses and I'm testing against a player, players have a minus 10% damage reduction by default, even if you're not wearing anything. So our damage will be 123 to 125 when doing blast damage by just shooting. So let's see if that's correct. Since I'm shooting in the torso, I also have to add another minus 10% because torso damage reduction actually works for blast damage. So let's test it in the legs. You can see we did 120 damage, so it is kind of correct. The damage is not going to be fixed when shooting with your weapon. It's always going to fluctuate between 125 to 128 or to 120. Now I'm going to max out the stacks at 5, so if we have 5 stacks, we have to include the 50% damage increase. So let's do that. And now let's test the damage. Now as you can see, we're doing 183, 182, 174, 183. But we have never seen a 186. Okay, there was the 186. So if we check our calculator, we have been doing 184 to 185 to 186. This is correct. This is the formula you have to use. It's just that unstable bomber is not stable. That's literally it. You will not always get the exact damage. But that's how it works. Now, of course, if you had status damage, then you would put status damage over here. If you had elemental damage, you would put elemental damage here. It's a separate multiplier. Same goes with unstable bomber damage bonus and unstable bomber damage. So if you were trying to calculate your damage, you would need to put the base damage like so. And then you would just have to put a line like this. Then if you want to add multipliers, you just copy this line and paste it here. Change the values here to like 55% of elemental damage if you have that. Do not change this or this. All you need to change is this number. And then if you want to add a new multiplier, you do it again and add it over here. Now, as for throwing the gun, you actually do not want to shoot the bullets. because the lower bullets you have, the less damage you will do. So in PvP or PvE, if you are trying to go behind someone, you'll just have to spam R on them, and that's it. That's where your main damage will come from. Now let's jump into the key armor for this gun. Unstable bomber range is 50%. This Viper mask will give you 50% range increase for your bomb damages. For every 2% increase in range, you will gain 1% more unstable bomber damage. Keep in mind this is unstable bomber damage, not damage bonus. These are two different multipliers, which does matter for your damage. If I equip this right now, you can see that when I throw my weapon, this is where the explosion range happens. But if I unequip it, the blast explosion simply does not reach the player. And the maximum range you can get is 140% with your mods and with 5 stacks. And the Viper mask. Now the most important thing is that when you have 5 stacks, see right here it says range plus 10% for 10 seconds each time unstable bomber deals damage up to 50%. So if I stack my gun to 5 times right now, you can see that we have unstable bomber range bonus 100%. Now the 50% comes from the mask and 50% comes from the stacks. However, the range that you get from stacking with your weapon, shooting and throwing the weapon, that 50% does not get converted to your damage over here. And that 50% range we get from the mask is converted to 25% unstable bomber damage. So it goes into the same multiplier as this unstable bomber damage that we get from 5 stacks. That would be 75. If you take a look at the unstable bomber range, we get 20% from the mask mod, Suffix, and we get 20% from the gun. Which in total, by having 5 stacks, you will get 50% unstable bomber damage, 25 comes from the mask converting, and 20% from the mods, which in total you will have 95% unstable bomber damage. That will be one multiplier. And in total, we will have 140% unstable bomber range if we are stacking 5 times with the stacks. We have the Viper mask on and the 2 Suffix mods. Then we have unstable bomber damage bonus, which will come from your cradle, 2 of them, and it will come from 2 Suffix mods. And lastly, it will come from Supercharged gun. Then jumping into the status damage multipliers, you get all of that from the mods. Obviously, since we're using Unstable Bomber Suffix, you will not be getting status damage from these 2 windows over here. So all of the status damage will come from your Talent Suffix mods. Of course, the Whimsical Drink will give you 44.5 if you have a level 5 chef. And that's about it. Rest comes from the cradle. For the blast damage, elemental damage, it will also come from Talent Suffix mods. You will still be getting 6% elemental damage or blast damage, as blast damage is considered elemental damage. So 6% comes from these 2 Unstable Bomber Suffix mods. And then of course, you will want to have Grade 1's damage if you're bossing to even increase your damage further. It is not necessary, but if you're enjoying PvE and you want to kill it faster, you will need these stats. Then you, of course, you will be getting 27.6 from the hot dog food buff. That is why you always use bingo as a secondary. You mark the target and then you swap to your main and your damage will be increased for so much. This sheet will be linked in my Patreon, so if you want to become a support of my Patreon, you can find 20 plus or even more builds in my Patreon, so the link will be in the description. Thank you all for all the Patreon supporters. I appreciate you all very much. Now for the Suffix mods you want to focus on the gun is elemental damage, status damage, damage against grey ones, and damage against elite enemies. This will be for your Talent Suffix mods, which will be on the helmet, gloves, top, shoes, and bottom. Now for the substats you want to focus on Unstable Bomber Suffix, which will be on the gun and the mask. You will want to have Unstable Bomber damage, obviously max 6%. You will want to have blast damage, and why we're taking blast damage instead of Unstable Bomber trigger chance is because you're always triggering the blast damage anyways when you throw the weapon. We're not going to be really shooting the gun because the blast damage trigger chance is only based if you shoot the gun and not throw the weapon. Of course, if you shoot the gun, then it might be better to go with trigger chance and if you never throw your weapon. But that's a completely different preset, and this preset is only for throwing your weapon, not really shooting your weapon. Unstable Bomber range will be the most important substat also, because converting 20% range will give you 10% Unstable Bomber damage. Now this is Unstable Bomber damage bonus, do not get confused. This multiplier right here goes into this window over here, not this window over here. That's why we have 6 here, because of these mods here. And the blast damage is going into the window of elemental damage, which is here. So that is another complete separate multiplier. But as we talked about the Unstable Bomber range, that is converted to Unstable Bomber damage, which is in this window over here. And as you can see, there's not many ways to get that damage. Only 3 ways. So that's it for the substats you need to focus for this gun. Now we're gonna jump into the mods explanation and why we're sticking to these mods and not anything else. Now if you check all the unstable bomber mods here, for PvP you could be using heavy explosives, but take a look at this. I throw the weapon, nothing is happening. Unstable bomber inflicts stagger on enemies and deals 40% damage less. It does nothing. Doesn't stagger, does completely nothing. Now we have Bombardier Souvenir. When triggering unstable bomber, automatically refill 10% of your magazine. That is completely useless. Don't even try using this, because we don't even have to reload the weapon. It almost does nothing, as you can see. This mod would be good only for Jaws, but for trigger chance based weapons, it would be completely useless. Of course, if you have 20 bullets in your mag, you will refill 2 bullets when you trigger unstable bomber, but still, that is not a good mod to use. Reckless Bomber, we don't use this because the gun is based off elemental and not crit, so we're not gonna utilize that at all. The best mod we're gonna be using is Supercharged. You will be getting 5% unstable bomber damage bonus for 3 seconds up to 6 times. So in total that will be 30%. And as you can see, we have a total of 92, and this is where I've included in the sheets, by the way. For the helmet, we're going to be using Deviation Expert. Now there's Deviation Expert, and then there's the Work of Proficiency mod. Reloading an empty mag grants 10% reload speed and 20% elemental damage, lasting until the next reload. So this mod doesn't work when you throw the weapon. So if you throw the weapon on full mag, which is like this, if you throw it like that, you're actually reloading the weapon on full magazine, not on 0. For that mod to work, you have to empty out your bullets to 0 and then throw it. Then that mod will work. And for the next mag, you will have increased 20% elemental damage. That's why the best in slot mod for this gun is Deviation Expert. Now, of course, if you have a different playstyle and you never throw the weapon and play with Shelter set, and you always shoot with the gun and reload on 0 bullets, then this mod would be better than Deviation Expert. However, that is not the preset we're using today. Pinpoint Strike Mask, how it works, is actually absolutely horrendous. Now, let's test the Pinpoint Strike mod on the mask. You might be wondering, it works and it's completely fine. It doesn't work, unfortunately. It only works when you shoot the gun, which is like this. But when you throw your weapon, the damage will not be changed. So let me show you right now. Let's equip this Pinpoint Strike. The substats don't matter. It will not increase our damage or decrease it. So let's just put it on. And we have 200% intensity. And since we have 200% intensity, we have only 14 bullets in the mag. So we can copy this value. Now, by the way, everything over here has all the damage reductions included from the player. So for example, minus 10%, you don't have to include that. It's already included in the sheet here. So that would be already your damage reduction. As you can see, 326. So let's test the damage now. Now, when I throw, we should do 326. If I remove this mod, we will still do the same damage when I throw the weapon. Let's see. 326. So now you might be wondering, okay, so if it doesn't work, what do we do? Well, you do nothing. You still use this mod because you need to have a Unstable Bomber Suffix mod. Unstable Bomber Suffix mod will give you range increase and all of those shenanigans. But if you don't have an Unstable Bomber Suffix mod, then your last option is to stick with Life Force Boost Talent Suffix mod. That would be for PvP or PvE, whatever you desire. If you get 8% elemental damage, 6% status damage, and 6% gray ones, that will be better than a blue mod. But if you don't, then you will need to get Flame Resonance talents with status damage, elemental damage, and damage against gray ones. These are the substats you will need for PvE. Status Enhance on the gloves, because you will get way more damage and higher value if you use status enhancement over elemental overload gloves. Now, you can still be using elemental mod on the gloves. Also, it comes down to which mod you have is better substats. But this is the best values you can possibly get. You would have to do your own testing and see which one is better for you. Because all players have different substats, and I can't really calculate each stats for you. So just try to balance between status damage and elemental damage and make sure both of these are balanced in between for the highest damage. Here's a good example of status enhancement and elemental overload. As you can see, we only have 2% less because status enhancement gives you 20% and elemental gives you 18%. So the status enhancement wins on the left side while elemental overload loses. As for the top piece, we need to be using status enhancement. Blue mods are way easier to get than gold mods. So this top piece blue mod has 12 status damage, it has 4.8 elemental damage, and 3.6 gray ones. Blue mods will be worse only if the gold mod that you have is not min-maxed 3 gold substats. So you should always use blue mods. But if you have a really god tier roll chest piece, then put that on. It will be better. For the shoes, we're using covered advance. There's nothing better to use because you just need to not take damage and you will get a 20% damage increase. For the bottom pieces, we are using status enhancement as well. We are never shooting the gun. The only mod you could be putting is precision charge. You would have to be hitting headshots though, however. But since we're spam throwing the weapon, you just want that pure damage increase from that blue mod without any conditions. Abnormal increase, by the way, does not work because again, it's the same as the helmet mod, work of proficiency. Whenever your magazine is empty, you will be getting damage increase. Our magazine is again never empty when we throw the gun at full mag, so this mod is completely useless. This would only work if you're shooting the gun and reloading on 0 bullets. And yeah, the reason why we're using 2 shelter pieces for this armor setup is because you will be getting 8% damage elemental increase for just having 2 shelter pieces. The reason why we're not using Savior is because Savior, you will be only getting 10% status damage and 10% weapon damage, but that is only if your HP is above 70%. Maybe sometimes you'll forget to heal, maybe your HP is not full, you will not be getting any damage increase. And even if you do get the status damage, you need to be getting elemental damage, not status damage for this build, because your build is lacking more elemental damage. We're not using 4 shelter pieces because you will be constantly spamming R to deal blast damage, and of course when you reload the weapon you will be losing your shelter stacks, so we cannot really use shelter pieces. That's why we have to stick with 3 Blackstone pieces. And of course we're using Lucky Rabbit Hide on the mask because it gives you 10% elemental damage increase constantly. You will be always getting it no matter what, so your damage will be fixed on 10%. Of course, you could be using Golden Wool, but Golden Wool sometimes give you 6% status damage or 8%, not always 12%. Both are good anyways, use whatever's more available. Golden Wool and Elemental damage will give you almost the same results. For the Lucky Rabbit Hide to activate, you just need to trigger blast damage, and as soon as you trigger it, you will always permanently have 10% damage increase. Technically, permanently, because it lasts for 3 seconds, and you can throw the weapon almost every 1 or 2 seconds, so it will be there forever. Well, ladies and gents, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you all for watching. Make sure to like this video if you found it helpful, and as always, subscribe for more. Join my Discord if you have any questions. Become a Patreon supporter as well if you want to support me and see the full list of all the builds in this game. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, and peace out.